Hi everyone, I am Mansi, and in this video I'm going to talk about STAR method in detail with an example. I will also tell you my interview experience along the example that I'm going to explain. And this video is not just limited to Google interview. If you are preparing for any other interview that needs STAR method to answer your question, you can watch this video. So let's get started. I have written this detailed blog that I will link it in the description. So if you need to go and give it a read, you can check it out. So let's get started. STAR method stands for situation, task, action, and result. Situation is what was happening, what was the challenge or any circumstances. Task is what were you responsible for or any goal you are working towards. Action is any specific thing you're going to address, and action is the most important part of your answer. It has almost 60% of the weightage, and it will have the main answer to your question. Result will detail about the actions or what you achieve, what you learned, any key takeaways. So you can mention that in your result. Now coming to when we should use STAR method. During my interview, we had hypothetical question and behavioral question. And I use the STAR method for both of these questions. But in some of the videos, you will see that you have to use STAR method only for behavioral question. But for me, it worked for my hypothetical question also. So if you feel that your hypothetical question does not fit the STAR method, you can skip it and you can use a normal method. But then it's on your, it's your wish that what you want to do. But for me, I use this for both the methods. Now, what are behavioral questions and what are hypothetical questions? Behavioral question will begin with tell me about a time when, have you ever dealt with, describe a situation where, give me an example of, tell me about a time you had. So if you can see the pattern of these questions, it is talking about something you have done in past already and you have to explain using a story. For example, tell me about a time when you went beyond your core responsibilities to help your team during a difficult situation. So, if you have worked before, or maybe not a job, maybe if you have done an internship or anything from a past experience, you can mention that and you have to build a story for that. Now, the interviewer is not only just looking for a perfect story, they are looking for a situation what you handled properly. Did you handle it properly? Or if you were in a situation, were you able to manage it? So they want to assess you and want to know that how well you performed in that situation. So the story should be a strong story and not just a normal story that does not have a much weightage to your answer. So just think about that kind of story and you have to prepare. Then, what is hypothetical question? A hypothetical question is not just about something that actually happened to you. Instead, the interview gives you a situation that and asks you to handle it. And it is an imagination situation where you never have been. For example, what would you do if? How would you handle a situation where imagine you are working on a project and whatever the situation was, and then how you handle it, how will you do it? Suppose a teammate disagree with your approach, how would you handle it? So maybe a scenario that you were never been a part of, but you have to think, imagine, and answer. For example, imagine you are working on a project with a tight deadline, and one of your key teammates suddenly becomes unavailable. What would you do? So maybe this question can be hypothetical for you. For example, if there is a question and you thought that you have already done in past, but it comes as a hypothetical question to you, for you it will become a behavioral question. And for example, if there's something that is actually coming as a behavioral question and you have not done in past, it will become hypothetical for you. So on the spot, you have to imagine something and you have to build a story. Also, one more point here, in behavioral question, you should mention, even for example, if you've not done anything in past about the question, around the question that is asked to you, you should build a story like this, that okay, I did this in past, and when I used to help this person in my previous job, when I was volunteering. So exploits that you have to relate it. You have to try to relate it that you have done it. If you won't try to relate it, it will feel that it's a hypothetical question to you. So if the question is coming as a behavioral question to you, then I would suggest do anything, even though you have not done in past, you should relate it somehow in a way that you have done it in the past. I hope it's clear. Now, let's understand STAR using a real example. Give me an example of a time when you went beyond your core responsibility and helped your team during a difficult situation. This is a behavioral question, and you have to answer using a story that you have done in the past. Now, you have to pause and think, because this is a this is an expectation that you have to take 2 minutes or 3 minutes, and then you have to think about the question and answer, and then you have to revert back. If you're reverting back the next moment, then it means that you are not prepared for the answer, and it's very clear. So take time, jot down your answer. If you don't have a pen and notebook, I would suggest you should have it beforehand, and write down the question what the interviewer is telling you at the moment, so that in next 2 minutes when you're thinking about the answer, you should know what the question is, and you maybe you will forget or something. So try to write it so that you have an idea. Then you have to jot down STAR in short, and then you have to quickly write down what is the situation, task, action, and result, so that after 2 to 3 minutes when you're going to revert the answer, you have some points in your hand to see and answer. This is the scenario that actually worked for me, and this is expected. Now, you don't need a perfect answer in your head. They think about a situation from your, as I mentioned, from your previous job, internship, college project, academic experience, volunteer work, part-time work. So any kind of work you have done in past, you have to relate this answer, because this is a behavioral question. Look for a situation where there was a challenge, something was at risk, and you personally did something to help resolve it. Because the question actually says that there was a time in past where you went beyond your core responsibility, core work, and then you helped your team to come out of a difficult situation. This is a question. So now you have to figure out a scenario where it actually fits it. Now, moving forward, how you will build it using STAR method. So what is the situation here after you listen to this question? First, give the interviewer enough context to understand what was happening. So now that you have listened to the question, you have to fit this in a scenario. So you have to tell me that you have to tell the interviewer that this scenario happened, and now this is a situation coming out of this story. Example, in my previous role, I was working on a campaign with a tight deadline. One of the teammates responsible for creating a campaign creatives had an emergency and would be unavailable for the following week. This created a potential dependency issue because we had to share the final assets with the client within the same timeline. Now, you can think of another scenario. For me, I am working in a marketing team, so I actually work with creatives and assets, images, posters, videos, and all. So that's why for me, this example came up in my mind, that there was a creative agency or creative head, and now he's unavailable for some emergency, and we have to deliver some of the assets or creatives to a client, or for example to our own project, for example. So this was the scenario that I thought. So you can think of any different scenario as well. Notice we haven't started explaining, but it's just a scenario that we have given to the interviewer about the context. Then coming to the task. Now, task can look like similar to the situation, because you have mentioned that this is the situation, and you will feel, okay, this looks like a task only that I have to resolve it. But no, task will be different from situation. Example, although design wasn't part of my core responsibility, I only had basic knowledge of graphic design. You have to set a context for the task. I realized that we need to find a way to keep the campaign moving without delaying. This is the task you have been assigned for, that there is a delay that is going to happen because the POC or the whatever the person is not available, and then you have the task to find somebody who can replace it. So what will you do? My goal, because the task, if you remember, if I'll go back and show you, the task says what goal you were working towards. So you have to tell the interviewer what goal you're working towards. So let's go back to that task thing. My goal was to help bridge the gap while maintaining the quality and brand requirements. This is the main answer I would say for task. Now, coming to the action. As I mentioned previously, action is very important, because now you're going to actually answer the question. Till now, it was just a scenario and task, what you're going to do. But now you have to tell in detail what you are actually going to do, what steps, what measures you're going to take. Okay. Now, this is an important thing. This is the most important part of your answer. A most common mistake, spending 80% of your answer describing the situation, and then you have to just say, and then you just come up with a statement like, so I worked with my team and solved the problem. This one line sentence is not going to work. You have to tell in detail. Either you give a paragraph answer, either you give some 4 or 5 bullet points that I'm going to take this step, then this step, then this step. So you have to either give your bullet point answer that you have to think about, and if it fits a bullet point answer, because for me I usually used to give a bullet point answer during my interviews time. So you can actually tell in a bullet point answer, or maybe you can tell a paragraph or story based answer. It's up to you. Now, be specific. You don't have to give a just normal statement that okay, I worked and it got resolved. No, you have to tell it in detail. The first thing I did was contact the program manager, and I think this is the best statement to begin with, because you will have a manager, and before you take any step, any measure, you have to inform somebody, someone senior. So I would say this is the best line to begin with. Begin with your answer and explain the dependency and the potential impact of the deadline. You have, because you are one of the person in the team, so you know if the creative is not, or the asset is not going to be on time, what will be the delay and what will impact the project. So you have, so you know the the basic things, and then you have to explain it to the program manager, and then you have to solve it. So here what I have mentioned is, now that instead of just simply flagging the problem, I propose that I could take on some basic design work temporarily. So this is something that you're proposing by your own self. Generally, what happens when you have some situation like this, you will go back to the program manager and tell the problem itself. Only the problem, but not the solution. But here you should think about solution from your own end also. So you thought to say that you have a basic knowledge of graphic designing. So I spent some of the time revisiting the tool and understanding the brand guidelines where it need to follow. This scenario actually happened with me in my current job, so that's why this scenario is coming in my head. Maybe for you there can be some different scenario, so you can mold your answer in that scenario. Then I created initial versions of the required assets and shared them with the program manager for feedback. Based on the feedback, I made the necessary revisions and got the assets approved before they were shared with the clients. Of course, you have to get it approved. So this was my basic answer. And there can be counter questions on my scenario as well that I'm going to talk about later after results. See the difference. You're not just talking about I helped my team, you're actually showing how you helped. So this is a strong answer. Now coming to result, you have to mention the result also. Now comes the result part, which actually people forget to answer, but this is an important part. The interviewer Tell the interviewer the outcome. For example, as a result, we were able to keep the campaign on schedule. This is the basic thing, right? Basic that because you have delivered assets, so now the project is on timeline. Without wasting your teammate to return, you have delivered the solution and the problem. The client deliverables went out within the planned timeline, and the team was able to avoid potential delays. More importantly, I realized that stepping outside my defined role and learning a new skill quickly can be valuable when the team is dealing with an unexpected dependency. And now you can understand from this context that you actually helped to for the project to be on time. You resolved the conflicts, and let's see what exactly we did, or what examples you can actually tell to the interviewer that you have actually made difference in the result. Deliver the campaign on time, you can mention, of course. Reduce the delayed time from X days to Y days. See, this will not fit in my answer, so you can skip it, but these are some of the pointers that I have mentioned that you can actually use when you are going to revert about the result part. Completed X asserts, you can mention. If you have exact numbers, then you can mention. Help the team meet a deadline, of course. Improve the process. I don't think so. This is relating to this context. So, but if you have different context, different scenario, you can mention this also. Reduce manual effort, receive positive feedback from the stakeholder. Yes. So don't manufacture XY, what I've mentioned here as a number randomly. If you have done it, then only mention, because there can be counter questions, and I don't want you guys to get, get in that situation where you can't answer the question. So if you have real number, then only answer. Otherwise, you can just mention that this happened and I resolved it. Now, here's the catch. Interviewer can ask you follow-up questions, which I mentioned to you. And this is where your preparation actually becomes important. You might give a strong answer and think, great, I'm done now. This answer is done. But there will be counter question for sure. And interview round 2 will definitely have counter questions, because I experienced counter questions in my second round of interview. In first round, my interview went really smooth. So I did not had any counter question. But now that the difficulty level of the interviews are becoming higher and higher from every year, so expect counter questions in round 1 itself. I took ownership of the, okay, not necessarily. The interviewer may start digging deeper into your story. And honestly, you should expect this. For example, if you say, I took ownership of the design work, they might ask, why did you decided to take responsibility instead of asking for another designer? So there can be a scenario where you go ahead and ask your program manager that now that this person is unavailable and we need another designer. But you propose a solution where you are talking that I will brush up my skills and I will come up with creatives. So this can be a scenario, and you should prepare or you should have something in brain to respond back to the interviewer. You can take 1 minute of the time or 2 minutes of the time to revert back, but now that it is a behavioral question, you have already done in past. So I don't think you need really time to think to revert back this answer, because this scenario has already happened, right? In hypothetical question, what happens that that never happened with you, and you have to think about it. So you can take time for counter questions, but for here in the situation, you can think of a answer that actually you are going to revert at that same moment. Now you need to explain your reasoning. Counter questions are really important because the interviewer may be trying to think about how deeply you are involved in the situation, and you're not just making up a new scenario in your head right now. So counter questions are really important for that. So don't just prepare a star question, prepare the whole story behind it. And this is the star method in whole from my side. And that's it. I will link this blog in the description for you to read. And if you have any questions on hypothetical question or behavioral question, you can definitely tell me and I can make a star method answer for you. I will make different videos on different questions that I actually had. I found my notebook of my interview preparation and I have a few questions right here, and I will create videos on those questions and answers using star method. So do watch those videos as well. And that's it from my side. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.